first instalment of a complete reading of Joseph's book, The Fall, begins with Michael's introduction from the book, paving the way for vital spiritual information that is to come in future chapters.
Hello, this is Tony Clarkson from the Sanctuary of Healing, and I'm here again with my good friend and colleague Michael G. Reccia. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Tony.
Here we are again.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, today we're going to start a series of interviews, a series of short films about the fall.
Yes.
Okay. We've done this before, haven't we?
We have, but we haven't featured the actual information in the book. And we attempted to persuade viewers to read The Fall because we feel it is vital information at this time.
The thing is about The Fall as well, it's what all the books were leading up to in the series, isn't it?
And it explains in current situations how we got here, why we got here, and what we can do about it to get out of it. So we feel that over the next few weeks, we will give away this information. We will read every chapter of The Fall.
And as somebody who's spiritually read books all my life, I know you haven't, The Fall for me is new information to Earth.
Yes.
I've never read it anywhere else.
Yes.
And it makes so much sense to me.
This is the thing that we get from readers. They say, everything finally makes sense. And it's not just a comment on life and society at the moment. It offers an explanation of what's happening, why it happens, why it repeats in our lives, and what we can do. We can do something.
Exactly.
We can reverse this situation, and it tells us how to do that.
And this is about people taking control of our destinies, isn't it?
Yes, it's spiritual control. It's understanding what we are.
Exactly.
How we create. Why we took a wrong step, what the wrong step was, and putting things right. It is a manual for putting things right.
It is a manual for putting things right. And so we're going to start this series by the introduction. What a good place to start.
Yes, the introduction was written by me, but we're including it because I must have been inspired in some of the things that I said in the introduction because they're extremely relevant now. And they set the scene for the rest of the book. And so we thought it was important to start with the introduction.
And it is so important now, isn't it, at this particular moment in time?
Yes.
Yeah. So Michael is now going to take over and read from the introduction from The Fall, and then in further videos we will continue into the body of the book. So Michael, I hand over to you.
Thank you. I titled the introduction The Long Hard Road to the Fall, an introduction. So, where am I? To be more precise, what am I? I appear to be a consciousness, nothing more than that. No form, no substance. I think, therefore I'm what exactly? I begin to remember. I voluntarily vacated my physical mind and body so that they can be used by someone else, by the discarnate spirit Joseph, and he's just returned to the sphere inhabited by himself and other members of his soul group. He's vacated the premises, in effect, leaving an empty house. Yes, that's right. I remember now. My body is around here somewhere. Ah, there it is. My eyes are tightly closed. I vaguely sense arms and legs, fingers and toes, eyes and lips, but I can't move them. After what seems like an age, someone gently touches my arm. It feels as though the fingers are actually penetrating my insubstantial, ethereal flesh. It's Jane, by my side as always. I know I'm close to my body, but it also feels like I'm teetering on a high, rocky ledge, about to fall. Yes, I'm falling. I open my mouth and gulp in a lungful of air. I'm back. After a few minutes, I force my eyes open. They're heavy, uncooperative. On a couch opposite me, I can see David and Tony peering at me, a look of concern on their faces. Jane hands me a glass of water. I hold it, stare at it. It's fascinating. I can see the glass, the water, but at the same time, there appears to be nothing there. It's simply a pattern of light energy. And that's nothing too. Eventually, it becomes substantial enough to my altered senses to allow me to take a sip. Was it all right? I manage. Did we get a chapter? Going into trance is not a pleasant experience for me. I'm nervous beforehand because there are always those unspoken questions lurking at the back of my mind. Will I come back afterwards? Will I be able to get back into my body? Will everything work? I suffer afterwards too. There inevitably follow 2 or 3 days of intense fatigue, a day of irrational anger and irritation, and a day of acute depression. My vibrations, having been set free and accelerated into bliss during a trance session, have to slow again in order for me to live in this world as I'm supposed to. And the shock of being dragged back down into this sticky, heavy atmosphere always brings my psyche low as it struggles to adjust. In total, following each session, there's at least 1 full week ripped forever out of the calendar of my life. A week when I'm neither here nor there, so to speak. A man with a foot in both worlds, master of neither, able to do little other than gradually recover. So why do this? Why do I and Jane and David and Tony dedicate so much of our lives to the exacting and debilitating procedure of bringing through Joseph and making his messages for humankind available to the world? Because in a world gone stark, staring, raving mad, a world that likes to pretend it is less violent and more civilized than it has ever been with regard to its savage past, when what Joseph explains and suggests is vitally important, essential to us all, for the liberation of our very souls and an end to physical and mental torment, and for the future and restoration of the planet we're ravaging and destroying minute by our actions, and more importantly, through our thoughts and beliefs. In the introductions to his other books, I've already covered in detail the story of how I initially took on the task of bringing through the Joseph communications as a result of a chance remark from my now departed spiritual teacher, Joan, and how what began as a series of clairvoyant communications — I had previously worked as a conventional spirit medium for many years — eventually deepened into trance communications, allowing me to take myself out of the picture completely so that Joseph could bring through much more information during those times when communication took place. I won't, therefore, tread old ground here. Instead, I'll ask you to consider our situation from your point of view. If you had, for whatever reason, been given the ability to bring into the world advanced, enlightening spiritual information from a highly evolved and benevolent source in contemporary language, information that, if heeded and acted upon, allows the individual to live a more fulfilled, healthier, happier life, information that finally and fully and absolutely and wonderfully explains who and what we actually are, why we are here on earth, what we are truly capable of, and what, unless we work to change things now, we are rushing headlong into. Could you, in all conscience, do anything else but access and deliver that information? And, having brought through the communications from higher dimensions, which of these options would you then choose in all conscience? To hide them under a bed and pretend the sessions had never happened? Or instead, and despite being plain, ordinary folks, with plain, ordinary lives, to seek to move heaven and earth daily in order to get them out into the world and actually make a difference? We had no idea when Joseph's first book, Revelation, Who You Are, Why You're Here, was published, that there would be other books to follow, and that each book, although it could be read independently of the others, would expand upon the last, building into a constantly unfolding, enlightening, and informing narrative. We simply knew that we were the humble custodians of something very special. We were a little surprised then when Joseph, having explained the spiritual mechanics of ourselves and of the world in Revelation, went on to deliver a second volume, Illumination, this time chronicling what could be done to change humankind for the better and to restore the planet, and also explaining why exactly that change was necessary. A third book, expanding on the first two, was to follow, offering possibly the most comprehensive account ever written of what to expect once we leave this world behind physically, your life after death. Intriguingly, in all three books, a thread could be glimpsed running through and behind the narrative in the form of a term gradually introduced at first, but which would gain greater significance and be mentioned with increasing frequency as time went on. That thread, that term was the fall. Joseph regularly alluded to some kind of cataclysmic event that had taken place aeons ago in our dim and distant spiritual and material past. An event that had produced an earth that had been changed and diverted away from its original purpose and form in some way, intimating that humankind on this planet had been around for far longer than we supposed, and that we are, each of us, not only unconscious contributors to the world of war and torture and power-seeking and lack we walk today, but also unwitting cultivators and perpetuators of this sorry state of affairs. It became obvious that Joseph's communications were leading to a full and extensive examination and explanation of the fall, and that this communication had an urgency about it, a need to be brought through as quickly as possible. Shortly after the last words of your life after death had been uttered, therefore, we began to sit together again to allow Joseph to dictate the contents of the book you are now holding. I personally had begun to feel the intense pressure and responsibility of bringing through such a book many months before a single word of it had ever been delivered. Its implications were so enormous that, as with the other books, we simply had to capture and record every word with unerring accuracy. A task made all the more daunting by the fact that throughout the project, we knew there would be direct opposition to this information being accessed and made public from the field, that negative, sentient, all-pervading thought field projection of mankind that has its own very specific agenda, that of keeping things in this muddled, violent world exactly as they are at present. Indeed, during the course of these communications, we would find ourselves and our endeavours attacked at every opportunity. Loud arguments would erupt inexplicably between passers-by outside the house during communication, severing the link and bringing proceedings to an abrupt close. Atypically late postal deliveries would send heavy parcels crashing through the letterbox onto the floor, again temporarily severing the delicate connection, wrenching me out of trance and causing us all to suffer from acute headaches for days afterwards. During a public trance demonstration at which Joseph invited and answered questions from the audience, a barely disguised hostility and anger was unwittingly directed towards him from a couple of attendees, opening a conduit for negative energy that resulted in weeks of disturbance and trouble for Jane, David, Tony, and myself. Delivery of the final chapter was interrupted by negative energies that prowled the boundaries of our little circle of light, with me being pulled out of trance by the lack of available spiritual energy several times, and us having to regroup following a hot, calming drink and a time of peaceful meditation in order to bring the book to a successful conclusion. To make things even more stressful, when we were midway through the book, Joseph intimated to us that the need for the fall to be in the world as quickly as possible had increased, leading to our decision to sit for communication not once a month, as we had been doing until that point, but twice. This ultimately enabled us to complete the communication some 7 months earlier than we would have done if we had followed our original schedule. But the consequence for me of this accelerated timescale was confinement to a murky, not quite here existence, during which my spiritual, mental, and physical energy levels were drained almost to zero, with me at times wondering in all seriousness whether I would in fact live to complete the task at hand. As you can see, I'm relieved and delighted to be able to report with a wry smile on my face that I did. With Joseph's words here in physical form, there then followed a busy period of preparing the book for print, during which I allowed myself the luxury of reading it for the first time. What's that, you say? Reading it for the first time? Well, yes, you see, the other members of our group, being present, naturally knew what the book contained, but I, having vacated my physical body and mind to allow Joseph center stage during the communications that constituted its contents, had no idea of what had been said, and deliberately avoided asking the others for information in case I absorbed some knowledge that would subconsciously influence and color future transmissions. What I discovered upon that first read-through was the most astounding spiritual manuscript. I'm allowed to say that because I'm only the messenger, only the instrument, as Joseph calls me, not the originator of the words. Contained within this book is an explanation of why things are as they are here, what caused things to be this way, and the simple yet committed steps that need to be taken in order to lift us out of the current status quo on earth. Each of us, when reviewing the fall, felt humbled by the enormity of its revelations and the simplicity of its message, reassured by the way that every fact and explanation made perfect sense and related backwards and forwards to every other piece of information in this book and the others, and even more determined to spread the Joseph communications as far and as wide as we possibly could during our lifetimes. Joseph's delivery is presented here as it happened during the times when we sat together for communication. Where breaks in transmission occurred for whatever reason, those are indicated in the text. In instances where Joseph fished around in my mental dictionary for suitable words to better describe certain concepts, those strivings for clarity have also been left in. At the conclusion of each chapter, Joseph would invite questions from Jane, David, and Tony concerning the issues he'd just raised. As these too are packed with information and Joseph's characteristic attention to detail, and as they expand on the themes covered in this book, they have also been included. As for introductions, Jane is my hard-working partner and my rock. David is the closest of lifetime friends and fellow spiritual seeker, member of the Band of Light, Joseph's title for us, not ours. And Tony is our staunch supporter and friend whose generous spirit has made possible the creation and distribution of our books, and who sits in on the Joseph sessions whenever duties at his healing sanctuary allow, explaining his absence from certain sessions. I should explain at this point that subsequent to this book, Tony sat in with each and every section. If the fall resonates with you, as it has with us, please, for the sake of humankind, for the sake of future generations, and for the sake of this planet, recommend this work to those colleagues, friends, and family you feel are ready to access this information. The one fact that Joseph has impressed on us during this work is that the time to change things, the time for action, is now. There's no point putting things off until tomorrow because, as you'll discover by the end of this book, unless we use our todays wisely, there are only a finite number of tomorrows left.
Thank you, Michael. And this is the first now of a series of videos that we're going to produce on this book, The Fall.
Yes.
And the next one will be chapter 1. And after that, we'll do the question and answer session from chapter 1.
Yes, so we will eventually put out the whole book
We will
on our YouTube channel because we feel it is so important that people have access to this material, make up their own minds about it, but if they feel it resonates with them, then there are things that they can do.
Excellent.
And the time, as Joseph says, to do those things is right now.
And the time has never been more right now than it is years after this was brought through by you. Yeah. And to reiterate what we've said in the past is that the Band of Light has no issue in these books in that we don't get any money out of them. Our only interest is to get this information out and to get people acting in a spiritual way rather than a physical way, be the bigger person that they really are. And that's our only intention in this. And so until the next time, Michael, thank you very much.
God bless, thank you.
God bless. And thank you all for watching. And if you feel like pressing the subscribe button, that also helps us. Thank you all, and God bless you all. Bye-bye now.